Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session about creating a flawless functional and visual user experience end-to-end. Our expert speakers today are Gleb Bahmutov, VP of Engineering at Cypress, and Gil Tayar, Senior Architect and Evangelist at Applitools. So without any further ado, Gil, the stage is yours.
Hi, thank you, Adi. I'm really happy to be doing this webinar with Gleb. I have been following Cypress and doing Cypress Applitools integration for quite a while, and I've grown very fond, even almost in love with this tool. So doing a joint webinar with Gleb is really nice. So first of all, a bit about us. Gleb, you want to present yourself?
Hey, absolutely. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. It's my pleasure to be here and a privilege to work with Gil. I'm Gleb Bahmutov. I'm VP of Engineering at Cypress.io.
Yep, and I'm Gil Tayar, as we said, a senior architect at Applitools. One of the things I have built at Applitools is the visual grid, which we will definitely talk about in this webinar. Okay. First, a small introduction before delving into code and Cypress and visual testing and functional testing and all that. First of all, I want to do a zoom back, a zoom up. Why do we write tests? And I have there are lots of answers to that question. I want to give my answers. I think we actually fear our own code. We fear changing it. We fear adding it. We fear deleting it. And we write tests to remove that fear. We remove the fear of adding code. This is an example of what a lot of time happens when we add code, well, metaphorically at least. Removing code. A lot of times, should we delete this function? I don't know. Maybe someone using it. Ouch, yeah. Maybe this CSS rule, should we delete it? Is it affecting anything? Who knows? So that's deleting code and fear of refactoring. I don't want to refactor anything. If it works, don't touch it. It will break. And that fear is very important because to write good, clean code that is maintainable over time, we need to remove that fear. And functional testing solves that. What I do is, I write the tests that cover all my app, and then I add, remove, refactor my code, run the tests, and voila, I know whether I broke something or not, and can immediately fix it while I'm writing the code and not 10 days later when somebody finds the bug. It makes me fearless. It's almost a superpower. Writing tests makes me a super coder. That is how I feel about functional testing, and that is great. And Cypress is the perfect tool for functional testing. It's fast, it's wicked, it has great documentation. I'll let Gleb handle that. But it is the perfect test to write functional tests. But there's a little teeny problem, and that problem is that functionally Cypress is perfect. But what about HTML and CSS markup? Well, if I forget an input tag, an input text, then obviously the functional test will fail. But if I do some changes in the CSS, if I remove some rules, if I do some CSS refactoring, does the page still look okay? So yeah, I know the checkbox says disabled, but does it look disabled? Does something look striked out? Can I remove the fear of changing my HTML and CSS? Unfortunately, Cypress doesn't help us because I can run the functional test, and even if the page looks weird, it still runs. So I have that problem of HTML and CSS markup, and that is what visual testing is for. Visual testing enables us to add markup in CSS, remove markup in CSS, and refactor the markup in CSS without the fear of breaking anything. And Applitools Eyes, as I said, I believe is the perfect tool for that, but we'll get there later. But really what I want, this is basically the introduction, and I think most of the time we have should be dedicated to talking about Cypress, talking about Applitools, talking about the integration between them. So let's go. Take it, Gleb.
Thank you, Gil, and I do agree with you. With good tests, we actually remove fear. And so let me switch to my part of presentation, where I'm going to take a real-world application and I'm going to show how to write functional end-to-end tests. And we're going to create a test user. I'll show how to log in quickly via API. I'll show maybe a little bit of how to make your tests faster and talk about the question that everyone asks, like, how do I clear the data between my tests, right? So that I can run my test again and again, and that test data doesn't accumulate. So a quick reminder, we're going to show a lot of stuff with Gil, a lot. And so if you have questions and if something is unclear, just write a question and we'll try to answer it at the end of the webinar or by email later. If you need help with Cypress, like here's where to find help on Twitter. Our website is there, and my Twitter handle there is as well. So we were looking around for a good demo, right? Like what would be a good demonstration of functional tests and visual testing? And we didn't want to do it just to do MVC with Gil. So Gil actually cloned this real-world app, which is just a clone of a blogging platform. And you can find everything that we are showing, all the source code and testing code and visual testing code on GitHub in this public repository. So I have this app running locally right here, and right now it's empty. I can click on new post and say test, right, about app, and I can write something in Markdown, just like on most blogging platforms. Maybe add a tag, test, and I can publish, and this article is published, and I can comment here. And everything is stored locally on the server side, and I'm running this application. Okay, so it's a lot more involved than just to do MVC. So what kind of test would you write? Well, user probably should be able to log in. So that probably should be the first test I should write. I need to write a blog post, so I should test that. I should test that the blog post that I write is actually visible. Maybe I should be able to comment. So basically, you take all of the user features and pretty much map them one-to-one to functional tests. So how do you start with Cypress? You just do npm install Cypress. That's it. That little command downloads an Electron built binary of Cypress that's built for your platform, Windows, Mac, or Linux. It comes under MIT license, and it's completely open source project. Everything I'm about to show to you is open source. You can look at the code, you can contribute, file issues, seek help on our GitHub account. We are looking at application that's a little bit more advanced, and we're trying to show the real-world app. If you're just starting with Cypress, we have introduction to Cypress and bunch of examples and bunch of simpler applications that if you're a beginner, look at those first, and then look at this application that we're gonna show in this webinar. Okay, so I'm gonna put all my settings into Cypress.json, and at this point I can show this. So I have my my application right here. I'm gonna run it at localhost. I'm gonna configure viewport so it looks the same, and I can start Cypress using npx cypress open. So this opens Cypress in a GUI mode. That's what I'm going to be using to see the tests, to run them locally. And immediately it shows all the spec file, all the test files that I have in my project. So first test, user should be able to log in. But before we actually do the login, let's make sure that the user with invalid account cannot log in. So how do we do that? So I have this spec file called login post, and inside I'm writing a test. So before each test, I have to visit my application, and this opens the application running at base URL, which is at localhost. And once I open, I start writing tests. So in this case, I'm going to just focus on this particular test. The test should find a sign-in link and click on it, just like a real user. Then the test should type the email, and I'm just using random email to make sure that it's invalid. I'm going to type incorrect password, and I'm going to click on submit. And once the test has done that, then I'm verifying that there is an error message and that URL is still logged in. We didn't actually log in. So how does it look? I'm going to click on Login Spec, which opens Electron browser or Chrome browser. And here's the test running. So it types the email, the password, clicks on sign in, and make sure that this message is displayed. On the left, you see all the test commands. On the right, you see the actual application running inside an iframe. I can hover over each command and can see how the application looked at that particular moment. So when we found the sign-in link, this is how the application looked. When we clicked, the application looked like this. It switched from sign-in to actually login screen. Then it typed into this box, wrong email. Then it found the password and typed no such user. And then it found the submit and clicked on it. And we can even see that the app made an XHR request. And then we confirm that we could not log in. So that's our first test. The user should not be able to log in.
Hey, Gleb.
Yes.
This is Gil. One of the things that made me really fond of Cypress is exactly that panel. It's not user experience in a way; it's a developer experience. The developer experience writing tests in Cypress and debugging and troubleshooting them because of that left panel is a joy, because you can see each step what happened, you can figure out the selectors, do all that sort of thing, because you have this really good developer experience. So really kudos.
Thank you, Gil. And one of the developer experiences, like what happens when you actually make a mistake. So let's say that I don't remember what this error message is, and maybe I use a wrong selector, like wrong message. And I say, so Cypress is watching my spec files, and you can see that it's trying to find this selector with this text, and it just could not find it. It's clear to me what went wrong exactly and when. And I think that's a great experience, because even if I write a longer end-to-end test that actually corresponds to the whole user story, if it fails somewhere in the middle because my application changed, not a big deal. I know precisely where it failed, because the experience is great. Thank you, Gil. I know you're a big fan.
Definitely.
Okay, so that was simple, right? That was like, okay, we'll just stamp it. What if I need to actually verify that I can log in? I actually need a test account. So how do I go about creating a test account? Well, I could create a test user manually and then use that user, by setting the username and password in my Cypress JSON and then logging in using that, right? But Gil actually didn't like that a lot. So he actually suggested, and he wrote himself, we should be creating the test account from the test code. So how do we do that? When you're working with Cypress, you're running the full application. So if you want to do something, you have to look how application does it. So if you go, the user goes to sign up and opens the screen. If you open the DevTools and then see what happens during the sign up, my application will make an XHR call to localhost API users with post method, and it will just pass the user information for the new user. It's a simple XHR call that my application makes to sign up. And from my application, I can do exactly the same call. So we can write a custom command called register user if needed. And we can use a request that's built into Cypress to make a post request to the same endpoint API users. And we can pass username, image, and whatever else like password and email. And it will just sign up for us. because it's actually mimicking exactly what's happening in our application. And because the user might already exist, we're just ignoring, double user error. So if the user is already there, not a big deal. So how does it look in actual test? Well, we want to register this user, log in, and check that we are logged in. So here's my test. That's more realistic. Before each test, I'm calling that custom command, which registers my test user. I'm visiting the page, and then, let me concentrate this. We are signing in. We're typing now the correct information that we use to register this test account, and then we're verifying that the page is actually displaying logged in and the URL is not logged in anymore. Perfect. We just verified that the real user can log in, and we created a test account on the fly before the test. Let's verify the most important feature in our application, that we can write a blog post. We want to log in not through UI. We want to log in via API. And we have excellent video explaining the philosophy behind this. Once we verified that our login works, that login screen works, we don't want to use it to log in because it takes time. We might as well log in via XHR call. But once we logged in, we want to add a new blog post, and we want to check if it appears on the feed, check that we can actually comment on that. So I have this code right here in new post spec. So I'm going to start with a very basic one, and I'm going to go through this line by line. So we want to click on new post, just like a user. Then we want to type the title, what the blog post is about. We want to type the article itself, enter a tag, and click publish. And once this has been published, we want to verify, we want to comment and verify that the comment is visible. So here's this test running in Cypress. Perfect. We just created a blog post, opened it up, made a comment, and verified that the comment is visible. The whole most important feature of our web application in a single test that runs in less than 5 seconds. And here I have to explain some things. So how do we actually log in? Again, we have to go to application and know how it logs in. In this case, when you're signing in, if you look at the network tab, you can see that it makes a post to API users login, and it passes the email and password. So our test should do the same. The return from that call is an object, and that object includes a token right here. And then if we look at our application tab, if we look at local storage, we can find the token set as JSON WT token. So here's Cypress equivalent. We're going to add a Cypress command login. We're going to make a request and pass the same user information that we used to create a test account. This will give us an object. From that object, we'll get the user property, then its token property. We are verifying that it exists, so we can easily check that it's not null. And then we get a token, and we just set it in local storage. After this command completes, we're going to have a valid JW token in local storage. And then when we visit the page, our web application will be logged in. That's as easy as that. So our test, before all tests, registers a user, calls login. So now we're visiting the page and we're already logged in. And now we can start writing just like a real user. Piece of advice: when you have multiple form inputs and you have to select them, don't try to use CSS selectors, IDs. We advise in all our guides and best practices to add a data attribute specifically for testing, so that when you change something, you don't break the tests, that the tests are not tied to implementation. but the fields are testable. So we suggest that you add data for title, for example, to select your elements. And then the test is exactly as I've written, and it runs just like before. Once you start writing more tests and you want to reuse the same title, article, and tags, you probably want to move them into a separate JavaScript file and just import whatever you need. Cypress comes with a JavaScript bundler included, so you can just use imports right away and then type the same thing so you don't hard code the values in your test. And I always say that Cypress is just JavaScript. If you want to type multiple tags and they're in a list, an array, you can just join them as you would join an array, concatenate strings, type everything. And because of Cypress's asynchronous nature, after you publish this blog post, for example, you can compare the URL using a regular expression, and you can verify each tag is visible and is on a page using cycontains. So just a few lines of code, but the test is realistic. Publishes an article, looks at the URL, and verifies that each tag has been created correctly. Here's an insight. If you type, just like a user would type, right? It takes a while, right? Imagine you typing a long blog post. So just typing the whole article so that you have a realistic markdown is kind of slow. So you can take shortcuts. For example, you can get the element and invoke the value method from jQuery, and it will immediately set the contents of a long blog post, and then you just type enter, and all of a sudden your application will get that blog post set. And this is much faster. So if one test verified that a short blog post can be typed, after that, just set it in a single shot. And we advertise a flexibility. You want to start testing your page like a real user, and you should have those sanity tests that verify it. But after that, if you're verifying other features, don't log in the UI. Do not type long blog posts over and over via UI because it works. So take shortcuts. You can even take application shortcuts. If I open my application, I discover that the version of real-world app that we have cloned has Redux data store. We can see the messages in our network console. So if I know this is a Redux store, I can expose it from my application if it's running inside Cypress, and then I can immediately get to that store and invoke dispatch method and set my long blog post using a Redux application action. And we have a blog post that describes, more examples. But this is super fast. Even a long blog post, as you can see, is typed or appears almost instantly. Don't be afraid to take shortcuts if you know that your application internals are already stable. I can verify that my blog post has been saved by just making a request to my API, getting the response, and then making sure that there is one article after I typed one article. And then I can verify, the contents of this article is what I expected them to be. But as soon as you run this test twice, you will see a problem. You will be expected to have one blog post, but you will pretty quickly discover that there are two blog posts, or three or more. And so what is the problem? Well, we never cleared the existing data. Our tests kept creating new blog posts, and now we don't know how many blog posts to expect. So before each test, it would be nice if we could connect to the database and clean the existing data. So how do we do it? Because Cypress tests run in a browser. But the database connection has to be done from Node or backend. It cannot be done directly from the browser. So in Cypress, we have a solution. If you need to write backend Node.js code, you don't write them in your spec file. Instead, you place your backend Node.js code in Cypress plugins file. So for example, here, let me show this. This is right in my plugins file. I can grab my connects, just require it, just like normal connects, because I know this connects is used to connect to a local database. And then I can write a task, which is a Cypress command. In this case, the task will be called delete all articles. Just like I could do from normal Node.js code, I can just open a connects, passing a client, give it a file name that matches what my application is using. And once I connect it, all I have to do is truncate the tables that I want to truncate. Okay. So I can truncate articles, article tags. So basically clean all the code and all the data that our test left behind. So in my spec files, before each test, I run the task and then I log in. And now I know that each test starts with empty database. And there will be only one blog post after I submit a blog post. So use site task. It's a great method. Okay, but here's a big problem, right, Gil? And let me switch, and I'm going to remove this. I'm going to go to my index.html, and I have a CSS file. So right now, everything works in my adding a blog post example. If I comment out this line, right, and I rerun the test, notice that everything's still passing, but the page is absolutely broken. But my functional tests are working because all the buttons are still there, right? All the links, the tags, all the markup is still there. It's just, it looks so bad. So it turns out if you really want to remove a fear that Gil mentioned, you want to combine functional tests with visual tests. And for this, let's use Applitools. Take it away, Gil.
Thank you. I will take it away. Oh, wait, just a sec. There we go. Okay, so Applitools visual testing. Let's talk about that. How does one go about visually testing an app? First of all, we do just like functional tests. We automate the browser and do what the user would, just like Gleb showed, and obviously use Cypress. It's great. And for each page we would like to visually test, we navigate or click or type to it. We take a screenshot and we check that it's okay. And that check that it's okay isn't that simple. But let's look how a test like that looks like in Cypress. It's the regular it, and you can see Gleb's code here, site.get, site.contains, click, type, etc., etc. And those are the actions that are the regular Cypress actions. And those are what you want to do when you log in. You click on the sign-in link, and then you type in the user email, user password, and then you click on the submit to log in. But what if you want to visually test the login page and visually test what happens after the login page, the empty homepage after the first login? And the answer is you take screenshots. You use Applitools plugin for Cypress and do site.iceCheckWindow, and you give it a name or a tag just so you'll know when you see it in the dashboard, in the UI, in the Applitools UI, you will know which screenshot it is. So we have two screenshots here, one of the login page before and one of the empty homepage after we log in Cypress. So it's that simple. You still have to npm install the ICE Cypress, just like you npm install Cypress itself. You have to npm install ICE Cypress, but other than that, you just do a site.ice check window wherever you want, and you're done. And this is how test looks like. You navigate, you click, type, click, and then you check a screenshot, and then click, click, type, and whatever, check another, etc., etc., etc. But how do we check that that screenshot is okay? Because you're only taking screenshots. But what does Applitools do with that screenshot? Because what ICE check window does is it uploads a screenshot, and we compare that screenshot with a baseline image of that screenshot. And how do we have that baseline image? Well, the first time the test is run, we take the first screenshots that the test says, say, hey, we don't have a baseline image, we'll make those the baselines. So you're basically comparing against the previous test that was okay. If there are any differences found between those screenshots, we raise a red flag. And then in the UI, and we'll see that later, you can accept the change, say, yeah, this is a good change. I know I added the button, so this additional button is good, or reject it and say, well, this is a bug. It's definitely a bug. Simple, right? Very simple. But unfortunately, it isn't. Because building a UI that you use to accept or reject a difference is actually frighteningly complex. So if we look at an example here, I'm switching between two, a baseline and the checkpoint image, the current image, and you can barely see the difference. A manual tester would probably not notice that, but a UI that shows it, it will pink eyes the difference. It will enable you to see lots of other stuff. You have the accept or reject buttons, that's the like and dislike buttons, and there's a lot of functionality around it, especially when you get to big screenshots where you have to zoom and pan around it and see the differences. We'll see that in the demo. And another huge difficulty, and one that stopped me before I met Applitools, before I went to Applitools, and before I knew about Applitools, was false positives. I was doing the screenshots thing, but I kept constantly getting errors where there were none. And why? If you look at these two, they look exactly the same. This is one on one machine and then the other on another machine. Unfortunately, they aren't the same. If you look at the two images, they are slightly different. Why? Different browsers? No, we can always check with the same browser, but different browser versions, different Windows versions or Mac, different graphics drivers even can generate slightly different changes between the two. And you know what? Phases of the moon. Sometimes we get really weird stuff where the pixels move like everything moves by 1 pixel, like because who knows what happened. So all these, if we check pixel by pixel, you will get false positives. So we need an algorithm that is really, really smart and looks at the image like a human would. And that is the algorithms that Applitools has. But what about different browsers? I'm running the tests on Chrome, that's true, but I want to see it on Chrome, on Firefox, on Safari, IE, and Edge if I'm unlucky enough to need to support those browsers. Not only that, today in the modern world, we need to see the application, the web app, as it runs on a smartphone, as it runs on a tablet, regular desktop, Retina desktop. We have lots of browser widths, and the application today knows how to be responsive to those widths. So we really want to test all those widths and all those different browsers. So theoretically, what we need to do is run the test once on Chrome, 1024, run the question one on Chrome on 2500, run the test on Firefox, on Safari, on IE. That's run each test 10 times for 10 browser version, and the answer is no. We can't really, because that will make our tests run really slow. Even with Cypress, Cypress is wicked fast, but try and run it 10 times, then you get a big problem. Why is this not a problem in functional E2E tests? Well, sometimes it is, but very rarely today, because modern browsers are basically the same. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, well, not IE, and Edge they're basically the same, and rarely do you see functional bugs that span cross browsers. And Cypress has decided to focus on Chrome, and I think it's a good thing, because you're basically, for functional tests, it's the same. But visually, there are differences, especially when you're talking about responsive widths like iPhone, iPad, etc. How do we solve this problem? We parallelize. One way to do that is to run the test, but in parallel. And by the way, Cypress has a great ability to do that. I think it's in the commercial version of the software. But there's a better solution for visual testing, not for parallel rendering, but for visual testing. Instead of parallelizing the tests, we parallelize the screenshots. So we take all the screenshots and run them at once, and not only run them in one specific browser and in one specific resolution, but run them in all the browsers and all the resolutions that we want, and generate all the screenshots in parallel to one another. But how do we do that? How can we take one screenshot, which is a bitmap, and run it on different browsers? That's impossible. But if we take a screenshot, that's impossible. What if we take something else, and we call it the DOM snapshot? What if we take the HTML of the page when you do an eyes check window? When you want that screenshot, we take the HTML as it is at that specific time. We take the CSSs and the SVGs and the images and all the resources and assets that the page uses at that specific time, and we upload them and take that and inject them to the various browsers with various widths, and then take the screenshots. And the answer is it's possible and it's doable, and it is exactly what the Applitools Visual Grid does. The Applitools Visual Grid enables the Cypress plugin to take DOM snapshots, upload them to the Visual Grid, and run the screenshots in parallel, and then send them over. Well, it's the same thing. Work with the Applitools Eyes server to check the screenshots, whether they're okay or not. So this is the Applitools Visual Grid, and this is how Cypress uses them to make visual testing really, really, really fast, especially across browsers. Okay, enough talking. Let's see some code. How do I write the test? Show me the code. We'll show the UI dashboard and everything. So Gleb already showed you the application, so no need. I will go immediately into the test, and we'll look at one test. We copied the tests. Usually it's the same test, and we inject visual stuff inside it. But in this case, let's take this one, the new post. And what we did was, it was interesting. We add eyes check window everywhere. Okay, so we click on the new post, and then we do an eyes check window to check how a new post page looks like. And then we type in the tags, and we type in the post itself, and before clicking on submit, we check window. And then after we publish, we do another check window. Notice that if you do a check window, that check window already validates everything on that page. So if you're doing a check window, you can remove all those functional validations that you added for that specific action, because when you're checking a screenshot and there was a functional bug, you will also see it in the visual screenshot, and that's a great thing. Because you're basically not only testing whatever you wanted to test, but you're testing things that you may have not thought about. For example, I don't know, the menu disappearing when there's an error message, or all those weird things that can sometimes happen in applications. So this is how it looks like. Let's run it. And I'll do npx Cypress open, just like Gleb did, to open the UI. There we go. And I will run the new post visual. There we go. And we're running Cypress just like it is. Well, okay, no worries.
You have to start the app first.
Yeah, thank you, Gleb. I'll npm start.
I'm paying attention.
Yeah, you are. I'll close it and I'll do it again. And notice that I think Cypress warned me earlier because it checks the base. That's a nice thing, and I ignored that warning to my detriment. Okay, new post visual. Woo! There we go. The test runs. Notice that the check windows here and here run really, really quickly, because we're only taking a DOM snapshot and uploading it to the visual grid. The test is still running. Notice that the test is still running because it's taking all those screenshots in the browser. Let's open Applitools Eyes and look at the test. There we go. This is Applitools Eyes, and this is the new test. This is obviously the runs I did to check that everything's cool and everything's okay. And here we have the empty new post page, the filled new post page, and the published lore and IMSM. And I can move between them as I want.
And Gil, just to clarify, this is what just happened, right? On your from your local machine. This is so fast.
Yeah, definitely so fast. Wait till you see the next. Notice that I'm running on Chrome 73. It's the current version of Chrome, 1024 by 768 on a desktop. Okay, great. So we've seen Applitools running. What I want to do now is something really cool. We've seen it run on only one browser, right? Let's go to the Applitools config. You can do it also in the test itself, but I chose this way. And as you can see, I chose one browser configuration. It's 1024/768 for Chrome. Let's add some more. Let's do 3 Chromes in 3 different widths, 3 Firefoxes, 3 different widths, and let's do some device emulation. I will do an npx Cypress open. These aren't really devices. What we're doing is we're using Chrome's emulation to emulate the width, the height, and the pixel density of those devices. Okay, so let's run new post visual. And we're running in test. Notice that because the visual grid is serving a lot of people, it ran 16 seconds previously. It may run like 20, maybe 30 seconds, but hopefully everything will be fine. And let's see how long it ran. Remember, we're doing 10 times as many screenshots.
I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah, me too. I told all the customers to stop using it, but let's see.
You don't have your own private cloud?
There we go. We're done. 35 seconds. It's usually actually 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. That's about ish. And notice how many screenshots we're generating. We can group them by browser or even by viewport. So we can see Chrome in these widths. And these are also the iPads and everything. So I can group them by Chrome and by Firefox. And as you can see, all the tests pass, and I can go through each and every one of them and see them in the different widths. You can see the different widths. This is 1900 by 1800 and 248 by 1024, etc., 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 etc. Okay. But visual testing without, failing is problematic. So let's engineer a change. Main.css. I have my little marker. There we go. The font family of the navigation bar is Titilium Web. I didn't even know it existed. Let's add another T, by accident. Oh, Cypress is already, nope, okay. So we're adding it by accident. Not sure, no, we don't need to restart it, but I already closed it. So let's run it again.
Yeah, it's just application notices it has Webpack header load.
Yep, my bad. Okay, and we'll run it again. There we go. Remember, we're running it at 30 screenshots because there are about 10 browser configurations and 3 screenshots each. And let's go and see. As you can see, it's already having problems, which is nice. Let's look at some of them. As you can see, it's painting it you can see it in this way or in this way, and you can see the problem. But you know what? what exactly is the problem? I mean, I can see the problem. You can see the problem here. I can see that there's a problem and Applitools recognized, but what exactly is the problem? Can we figure out what in the CSS changed it? Well, obviously we know what it is because we just did, but if you're a developer that found it, you know, CSS can be horribly complicated. Or if you're a test engineer, that's even harder because you don't have access to the source code. But we have this really, really cool feature called the root cause analysis, where you click on this and click on the error, and you get the exact change that caused this problem. Instead of Titilium, I wrote 2 T's and got the exact change. So this not only allows you to see the change, it also allows you to see the root cause of the change and fix it in like 5 seconds. But what if I want to, let's say it's a good change, okay? Let's give it, let's say that I would really want to change the font and I want to accept all these changes as good changes. Now look how many, let's close, look how many changes I need to accept. So I need to go to each and every one of them, click on accept and go to the next one and click on accept. And I really can't do it in a group mode because maybe there were other changes that I don't want to accept. So what do? We'll use auto maintenance. Auto maintenance, and I'll very quickly show it, will group all the changes into one, and now it says all these changes are exactly the same change. We'll click accept the change, accept this change also because we can see it's the same change, and we're done with 2 clicks. And I won't save the change because it's not really a good change. So basically, not only do we enable you to run across multiple browsers, the maintenance of so many screenshots when there is a change is very, 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 very simple. Okay?
Can I ask a question while you're showing this?
Sure. Yeah,
So
I think it's the first time you're seeing it.
This is so impressive. I'm really impressed. But when you look at the dashboard, so the Chrome had changes, unresolved changes, but I think the Firefox did not. Have you noticed that? If you go back to the, right?
Yeah, can I undo? I'm not sure I can undo.
If you look at browsers, right?
Huh, very interesting.
So my suspicion is that
as you can see,
on Firefox.
Firefox, yeah, it doesn't recognize Titilium.
Yeah, so it didn't recognize the original font. So
yes, so the baseline was wrong in this case. So but once you change the font, you can immediately see the problem. Yeah, yes. Thank you, Gleb.
No, it's just interesting to look how this is cross-browser, right? We always say evergreen browsers. Well, there are differences.
Yep, definitely. So that's basically an intro to Applitools and using Cypress, which is a great way to integrate and to work with Applitools. Hope you enjoyed it. And just a few things we haven't shown here, and I'll be really, really quick about it. You can take a selective screenshot using selectors. You can check just one component. We have GitHub integration, so you can see what each pull request the visual diffs were, and in Bitbucket's the same. We have Jira integration, so you can create an issue directly in our dashboard. Coming soon is Shadow, DOM, and Canvas support. And we have ignore regions. Well, let's say you have a date somewhere and you want to ignore that region, floating ignore regions, and layout mode, which is an amazing feature, which I don't, unfortunately, have the time to talk about. Okay, and I'd like to do a shameless plug. A Cypress course will be in Test Automation U, the Test Automation University, which has lots of really great courses. I will be writing it. Yeah, that's for you, Gleb. And I think that's it. Thank you. Let's see. Do we have any questions? I'll look into if it allows me to look in the, there we go, look in the questions panel. Okay. Do we have, this one's for you, Gleb. Shift left in Cypress. Is there how does Cypress and functional testing work with shift left? Is it conducive to shift left or not?
It's an excellent question, Gil. Absolutely, we position ourselves as allowing you to shift your test left. That means you're not testing your application end to end when you deploy it to staging or when you deploy it to production. You're testing your application right as you're writing it locally and running it locally. Like that's how we ran it with Gil. We ran it on localhost and we ran full suite of tests, just like a real user, as we were developing it locally. So it's as left as you can go.
Yep, I definitely agree. It's a great tool for testing the changes as they come while you're writing the code and not later when you know it's almost fully deployed. Adi, any other questions?
Yes, of course. We actually have a lot of questions. So Gleb, this one is for you. What is your opinion on selecting your fields based on classes instead of labels? For example, with Cypress testing library.
So Cypress testing library and like React testing library and DOM testing library from Kenzie does is an excellent library. It allows you to actually couple your tests to testable selectors rather than to implementation. We have a guide that goes along exactly the same lines, that you should be not using, let's say, ID or page structure or style classes to select your input boxes, your your headers, your banners, and so on. Instead, you should select by using a test attribute, right? There are some ideas in Cypress testing library that go beyond that, like select by label, right? Which allows you to bring accessibility aspect into selecting an element. And if you adopt Cypress testing library, we only welcome that, and we think your test will be more maintainable in the future.
So we had another question about actually Cypress and Applitools together. So decide which one wants to answer this one. So is actually the question was, is Applitools an inbuilt feature of Cypress?
Not yet. No, we're a plugin. Cypress has many plugins. They have a plugin infrastructure, but the only thing you need to do is npm install eyes Cypress, and that's it. You can use it just like I said, sci.eyes check window, sci.eyes open, etc., etc. It's almost built in.
We probably in the future will explore maybe tighter integration where you don't have to pass like Applitools token and Cypress token for you to actually record to two dashboards. This is working in progress, but right now these are two separate tools just working very well together.
So I think the next question is for Gil, but I think that Gleb can chime in here definitely. So will the Cypress test fail when there is a difference in the screenshot?
Gil, you want to answer that because you've written it?
Oh yeah. Yes. Not the test itself, but the whole file will test. So if we have different its, those its will not fail, but the whole file in general will fail. And the reason we're doing that in this way is we want to grab as many screenshots as eyes check windows and screenshots as we can and run them in parallel. So if otherwise each test method would have waited its turn, and we really want to use the parallelizing capabilities of the visual grid to run it all. So in a way, it's a compromise between speed and accessibility. But in the end, yes, definitely the test will fail.
Gleb, this one is for you. I saw that you used the request delete all articles. Wouldn't it be a security issue to expose some routes this way?
Excellent question. I would say that if you're testing production, especially, you have to be extremely careful with the tests you're running. They should not be destructive. Luckily, it's easy for you to configure, the plugins and the tests, depending even on the base URL and on the environment. and, for example, only run a specific read-only end-to-end test when you're pointing at staging or at production, and not run the full suite that includes like delete all the articles or drop tables. Obviously, don't run drop tables in production, please. And don't blame me after you've done it accidentally.
And Gleb, I think in production, even if you want to, you wouldn't be able to access the database. Because we're running locally, you had access to the database file, so that wouldn't have been a problem. In production, well, you don't have access to that, though. Even if you want to do a truncate all, you can't. And if some weird way you can, well, that's a security issue that has nothing to do with Cypress.
I have to also say that you should review your test code just like you review your production code through pull requests, through team reviews. Like, are we actually doing what we think we're doing? Or are we accidentally going to drop the database when we're running our end-to-end tests? I yesterday saw a tweet from someone who said, I was running my end-to-end test, and then I actually figured out that I'm using a SMS service, and every time I run my end-to-end test, I'm actually was paying for them, right? Accidentally. So please review your test code.
The next question is for Gil. The DOM/CSS capture sent for screenshots on the visual grid, is it captured per browser type or just once on one browser?
Just once on one browser. Today, the servers, applications don't send different HTML and CSS per browser. They send the same HTML and CSS for all the browsers, so there's no need to capture it for different browsers. That's not a problem anymore. Like back in the dark days, like early 2000s, when servers looked at the user agent and sent different HTML and CSS, that doesn't happen anymore.
And this next question is for Gleb. How does Cypress differ from Selenium?
So we are not built on top of Selenium. We are a tool that decided that instead of running outside the browser and sending commands through a protocol, we want to run our test code right inside the browser. That's why our command log was right next to the iframe with your testing code, with your actual production application. And that allows us to avoid some of the problems of not knowing where the state of your application is before we click a button, because we can observe your DOM, we can pause the JavaScript on your web application while testing code runs. And so the architecture is very, very different. I advise you to go to Cypress documentation. We have documentation and examples and video presentations when we explain the difference in detail. On the other hand, Selenium allows you to control multiple browsers. We only limit ourselves right now to Chrome and Electron.
Okay, so we will take one last question because we are out of time. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention I see all your thank you notes to Gleb and Gil, and I will send them to them after the session. So just know that all your thank you notes and everything is going to get through to them. And we also have a lot of questions that did not get answered during this session. Those will get answered by either Gil's team or Gleb's team, depending on the question and context. So keep those coming. We will take those up after the session, so no worries about that. Last question is for Gil. So someone is asking, can we test static images with Applitools and not just websites, for example, PDFs, images like JPEG, PNGs, etc.?
Definitely, we have an image SDK which allows you to upload the images and do the comparison as if they were screenshots. Not a problem. Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. We even went a little bit over. Apologies for that. I want to thank everyone that joined us today for this live session, and of course, to thank our guest speakers, Gleb and Gil. I just wanted to remind you that the link to the recording of the session will be emailed to you by end of day Monday. And I do hope to see you all at our next event.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Applitools, for organizing this webinar. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
And thank you for being this wonderful guest, Gleb. I had a lot of fun doing it with you and showing both tools. Thank you, everyone, for joining.